their meaning is so important. Sometimes you look around the world, you like looking around the room and be like, oh, oh, y'all think that means that? Like, no, it don't. It
But
don't
they
mean
say,
that.
Leonard, am I the only one hearing this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sometimes it be feeling like they live, but yeah, you have to be able to, if you want to make an impact, a global impact, you have to be able to speak in a multicultural language.
Right, right.
And sometimes it gets frustrating because I'm gonna tell you something, man. Like history, like I'm a history buff. Um, History has never been changed through speaking
Right, right.
multiculturally. It's always
Exactly.
been changed in some type of violent, hostile type of way, and that's always been the case. Like it took um Attila to truly believe in his culture, his people, and that being right, um, to conquer Rome, right? Or
Right.
Hannibal the Conqueror, or any of these different people, Alexander the Great, or um, uh, Scipio Africanus. Like everybody's working from that place of what I think is more important than what you think, even though we all just want to live, we all just want to eat, we all want to feed our families.
Right.
There's something else in order to affect change, but change different parts of the system. Um, then we'll then yeah, then it's being able to speak in a multicultural kind of way, is being able to say, okay, look, nothing against the system, but I think that these parts could change in order to make us a little bit more feel a little bit more comfortable, feel a little bit more um,
Okay.
accepted, and you know what I mean, or heard.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
So yeah, man, this is a great conversation. It's going well. It's ironic we're talking about acting. It's like when I pause it, and I'm like, hey man, I gotta pause it. And then we're talking before I hit the recorder. I feel relaxed, comfortable. And as soon as I hit that button, this is recording resume. Like, like, wait a minute. What's that switch about? Just
it's
trying
it's it's the
to
program, man. I mean, it's so funny, but we gotta do it too because context, you know.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because you're like, look, I'm not that guy. I'm not fake. I'm not phony. I'm not this and that. But
Yeah.
so
So
sometimes it'd be like context is how people who are looking
yeah,
in understand.
on cue, man. So hey, is
Mm.
entertainment and media ever just entertainment? Or is there always a message that is communicated through the things we watch and listen to?
Well, that's a great
So,
question.
and just real quick, sometimes I'm sitting there, you're watching a movie with people, and I'm always that one. Like,
Yeah,
hey man, it's just a movie, man. You think too much. So
it's so funny because I'm on sets,
uh
and I just think I look at movies and I see the director telling them, "All right, now shake, no, just take it to the
shake,
sky."
shake your fist at the sky. But there's no God up there. It's just, am
Yeah,
I.
right. And the actor is probably like, but why would I be? Just do it.
Well, often I don't know how much we even think about that, getting in the
That's
roles.
Yeah, it's funny because drama, right? Like sometimes sometimes when you make a movie, you have people who are like you who analyze everything. But entertainment is literally the opposite of something being analytical,
Mm,
right? Entertainment is the only thing you could watch and shut your brain off.
dangerous.
So it's crazy you said that because entertainment coming out of Greece, when they first started to do these comedies and things like that, and they moved away from like more educational things. That was the intellectuals' take on it.
Hmm.
Entertainment is dangerous
Yeah.
because you don't have to think.
Yeah, you're lowering the filter.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, so yeah, it's just crazy you said that. But I was gonna say, to answer your question, yeah, man, I think, like, when you sit down, you're writing a story, man, like, everything means something to you,
Right.
and for some people, um, and sometimes, you're tapping into different communities. There's people who, because the Illuminati, that whole thing got really huge,
Right.
and there were movies that were, made to really take advantage of the amount of energy connected around that. Or
Right.
there's so many movies around the LGBTQIA community. There's so much energy. There was so much energy around, even though, like, there was a war on drugs and things like that. There was
Hmm.
so much energy around perpetuating drug culture
Right.
and calling it Black culture,
Man.
right? So
Yeah.
then you start to think, like, wow. And then again, like, a lot of these people's personas were birthed out of watching Menace to Society, you know, uh,
Right.
New Jersey Drive, and these different films, and then music came out of there, right? And you got all
Right.
these, you got these different people who, um, these different rappers who also have this persona that they come out with, this character that they come out with, you know, um, that they give out to the world. And the thing about our subconscious brains, as kids, the reason why we're so sensitive about kids is because, for the most part, kids don't really know, like, when somebody's telling the truth and when they're not, you
Right.
know. Like, our
Right.
subconscious brain doesn't judge things based on whether it's real or not.
Uh,
That's not
it
how.
just looks subjectively. It just sort of sees what is, and it doesn't make
Yeah,
the logical discernment.
exactly. That's what your conscious mind is for. Is to defend your subconscious mind, is to be able to say, all right,
Ah,
well, that's
correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's not, that's not true. That's fake. That's phony. But that's why, when it comes to scripts and things like that, and why advertising gets so many dollars, is because they're really speaking to your subconscious mind. You can only defend so many different things. You're driving down the street and you got a billboard, to the right of
Peripheral.
of your peripherals. Your subconscious mind is downloading that, even though your conscious mind is focused on the road,
Right.
and then all of a sudden you begin to develop these different ideas as you get older of what the world is,
Yeah.
and none of it looks like what you were raised on.
Right. Right. Because it doesn't have to be based in logical reality. It can be sort of those abstract notions or the things that were presented to you, like you said, the brain hack.
Exactly, yeah. So it's a lot of it is how other people see the world. They're putting it into these pages, they're putting it into their work. um and then when they show it, um it's how they see it.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes it's how they want others to see it. Well, of course it's how they want others to see it, because it's the way that they see it.
Right.
uh
And it could be, like you said, it could be a nefarious thing, like I want to program people, or it could just simply be, I just want to tell a good story. But inevitably, that story is coming from an opinionated place, in that it's coming from an individual's experience,
yeah,
ultimately. And then that may or may not be wholesome for another group.
exactly. you know there's so many, actors, especially Black actors, who look at their Black roles and they're like, nah, like, Black people don't act like that.
You know what?
But
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
bro. You know what I want to say, man? And before I lose this is something I've always thought and I've always questioned and I've always wondered about. But
Yeah.
it's become so normalized, and the overwhelming normalcy of it tends to periodically shout down my conscious objection to it as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to run this by you. And so, in the sense that we say that we all play roles and we all wear masks and we live
Mm-hmm.
behind different facades, and I think about reality versus abstract and theater. And when you look at the ramification of calling a man black, and beyond that, calling a people black, when say an objective reality, okay, I say, Leonard, wardrobe is missing, we need a tuxedo. You say, what kind? I say, bring me a black tuxedo. And you bring me a brown tuxedo, right, with black trim. And I
Mm-hmm.
say, "Ooh," I said a black tuxedo. And you said, this is a black tuxedo. I said, that's brown. You say, oh, my bad. Should I go get a brown one? And everybody's like, no. Everybody on the set, like, no, we all call that a black tuxedo. And
Yeah.
I said, well, what do you call a brown tuxedo? So,
Yeah.
well, this one right here, it's just a lighter shade of brown. And there's all this confusion
Lighter shade of black.
because the precision of the language. See, what we would be doing in that instance is agreeing that a brown tuxedo is in fact black.
Yeah.
And if we all agree upon that, then there's sort of a logical dissonance that has to happen. We have
Mm-hmm.
to make some sort of inference in our minds that says, yes, I'm comfortable that this is a black tuxedo, when objectively we know it's like actually not black.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple of things that happen in that realm. uh, you have precise language descriptors, and then you can have abstract and metaphorical.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have those two realms and you say, when the cops want to, or so if you lose your dog, you post the poster, you're going to say black if it's black. If it's brown, you're going to make sure you say brown.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do this because you want actual results. You
Mm-hmm.
want people to actually imagine in their mind the actual being you're referring to. In this
Mm-hmm.
case, if it were a dog.
Yeah.
But in the metaphorical sense, you can get away with saying things like, you know, I'm they're like, how you doing? I'm kind of blue today. I'm blue.
Yeah.
And though we know you're not blue, but it's okay because we know you're referring to something beyond the physical. See, now we're in the metaphysical. Or if you
Yeah.
say that person is yellow, when they say yellow belly or yellow, however they say that,
Yeah.
we know anybody of any race, ethnic group can be yellow.
Yeah.
Or we can say,
Yellow.
it goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Uh, and so
Feeling pink.
when we move into the realm of the metaphorical, you can use actual imprecise descriptors
Mm-hmm.
because the descriptor you're using is actually accurate according to the metaphor. So if you say the white knight, okay, the white knight, they can be right. They can come in shiny silver, and they call them the white knight because they're making a reference to their virtue.
Yeah.
Or if
Purity.
if you say the blackest day of my life, you say, or if you say it was really a dark day for me, the sun could be shining that day, but right, if someone passes who you love, you say it's a dark day. So it's a metaphorical description. When you refer to a whole group of people in a metaphorical sense, and you say black, right, and you call another group white, etc. What is that? If I hand you a mask and you're going on set, and I say this is your character today, and I hand you a black mask, and it's a theater, and then you might think, where's my cape and my dagger, right? And who's
Mm-hmm.
gonna hit the organ when I come out?
Yeah.
Because according to the facade I've handed you, you're expected to play a certain role.
Yeah.
And how much extra emotional, psychological energy does it take for you to still play a positive role, even though I give you a black mask? part of that constant need to reaffirm and prove the positivity is because we are living behind a facade of blackness. I just thought that tied into the whole role play thing in real life. But yeah, go ahead, man.
That's the truth. That's institutional racism right there that you're talking about. That's institutional, and I shouldn't even say racism because racism is more uh economical,
I
you
agree.
know.
Yeah, I
I,
agree with you. It can be a fact. It can be a part of it, a faction of it. Could tie in together.
yeah, I mean, you think about it like this. Well, okay, so my daughter's school, at her school there was a teacher who used the N-word, right? There was a kid who wrote it down on a desk, and it was a white teacher. She wrote it down the kid, he's a black kid, wrote it down on the desk, and she went to him. She's like, you can't write down the word, right,
Said it
right,
herself.
yes, but
Oh
and then
man.
she said it like 4 times, right?
Right.
And to me, I was like, you know, we had a conversation about it because what ended up happening was the kids went out and they protested, and parents and
What
everybody
age?
protested.
What age?
This middle school.
What grade? Middle. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So my question, because first I'm like, because she calls me and she's like, hey dad, all the kids are going out protesting this particular thing. Can I do it also? Right? Because we had talked about it the day before. And I'm like, you know, I like to ask you, if this is really what you feel, or if you're following energy, into this particular matter. Because how I feel is, I don't know if you guys should be protesting. I don't think you should be protesting at all. So you look at Malcolm X, you look at Martin Luther King, you look at the Black Panthers. They didn't protest anybody saying anything.
Right.
I don't care what you say.
Right.
My question to her was, is it a good teacher? Is she a good teacher? Because if she's not, she should have been fired. Now there's an issue with the entire institution, right? But if she says
Right.
something, if this kid gave her the opportunity to use the word again, again, and again, first of all, why isn't that kid in trouble? And secondly, like like the kid has to understand, why am I giving anybody the opportunity to say something disrespectful,
Right.
so we got to take some responsibility in that, right, for
Right.
one. And then yeah, like, is she a good teacher? And then three is like, we don't protest for what somebody said. That don't make any sense. If they're stopping us from achieving anything, if they're stopping us from being able to feed our families or grow in society and things like that, yeah, we want to affect change in that. But if they're like, you know if somebody say your mama, i'm not gonna I'm not gonna protest that. I'm not gonna get up and,
Right.
like,
Right.
this whole Dave Chappelle thing is like, comedians. I love comedians, and I love comedians because they give me every reason not to be depressed. They
Right.
give
Right.
because
Right.
they see the world in this funny kind of way, where they're able to take the most tragic things and not allow it to make them cry. And I
Even
love that.
and I
It's
was gonna say even tragically funny, because sometimes tragedy, you can laugh and you can cry, and sometimes you can, the same way people can cry at happy events.
yeah,
I think there's sort of a tragic comedy essence to some things. Like there's some irony in things, even if you
yeah,
don't say quote unquote funny, but sometimes there's irony in things. There's sort of poetic justice in things,
yeah,
and sometimes it can be sort of that ironic, sort of smirky type of thing, which, good comedians always are good at sort of bringing that out,
yeah,
you know.
exactly. And we've reached this place in our culture where what is said is, or in how things are said, are become a vehicle to um, just disrupt society. And it just,
Right.
to me, it just doesn't, and disrupt our own lives. It just doesn't make any sense. It's like, yo, you got to have something better going on in your life than to be able to take time off work or even quit your job to protest what someone said, unless they said something like, unless you're at work and, I don't, I'm a descendant of a slave. There's nothing that somebody can tell me that, would make me make sense of it. It's like, yo,
Right.
like these people went through monstrous um day to day, moment to moment things. Like what was said to them was the least of their worries.
Pause.
You know what I mean?
Pause. What you just said, and I'm going to say this. I'm going to tread carefully. Maybe not. I might stomp a little bit. But
Yeah.
okay, so what I see with what you said, in a sense, you have a logical processor, which is the forethought, which is the forefront of the mind, the logical processor that says, what is this? How is this going to affect me in reality? Yes, I hear the sound, starts with N, ends with R. I know what emotions is supposed to trigger, but
Yeah.
what is it actually going to do to me in reality? Should I make this a priority, and how much energy should I expend on it? Now,
Mm.
I imagine during those days, our ancestral days, when they were facing actual whips in reality, actual dogs that were trained to tear and go for tendons,
Yeah.
actual industries that were built around making the best sort of torture devices to coerce people into working when they didn't want to work. When
Yes.
people had to work literally until sometimes their muscles separated from their bones, when they were
Yes.
facing these sorts of real things,
Constant rapes.
words were not at the forefront.
No.
Words were, hey, I gladly take you calling me a name if it doesn't, if it's not something in reality. So that being said, that seems to be a more logical approach. And
Yeah.
at one point, and this is where I was gonna tread softly, but I'm gonna put a foot down here and say the emotionalization, the rhetorical emotionalization of society in general, where feelings all of a sudden take a forefront and must be considered, and offenses move from the area of concrete offenses, right? He shot me, he kicked me, he knocked me off a building, to he said something or she said
Yeah.
something.
Yeah. A few things. One, like when it comes to like like I used to have I had a friend, we used to argue about this woman, and she used to talk about how she feels a certain way about men because she wasn't able to move up in her business, or she wasn't able to move up in her company, and she's being stifled, and she's not getting paid the same, and blah blah. And
Is
I'm
she a
like,
black woman?
yeah. And I told her, I
Okay,
said,
cool.
d- d- are you talking about men in general? Because I did like I don't really think any black men are the reason for you not getting paid equally. I
No.
really don't. I don't think that. I don't think that the person that I'm not going to name the company that owns that company or is even in accounts payable. Um, Sometimes, and I'm not saying like black man are without fault. I just think that when it comes to equal rights, me growing up, and this is just my own experience, I saw where um, my grandma's words meant just as much, sometimes even more than what my grandfather said,
Right.
right? I saw where my mom, what she said and what she thought meant more. And to me, I'm sure that like and it's not just in my house. Like I've seen it, I see it. I see it in different homes, There's many homes where it's just the woman that's there, but even where the man and the woman, because this is what I learned from different men in my life in those spaces that I was telling you about. Um, where I hear men say, happy wife, happy life.
Right,
right?
right,
And these are men who look like me who are talking like this, who get up, they go to work every single day, they put their checks in their wives' hands,
right.
who are on the front line, talking about feminism, who are talking about not being paid equal and things like that. Like, yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. And I understand that you have an issue against men who are uh, who aren't promoting you, who aren't treating you equally. I understand that, but we got to see it culturally. It's not our culture
It's
not
not
to not to treat you like you matter, like you're not equal to us. Like me going to work every day and isn't just as important as you taking care of the house. Like
right.
there's
I
that's
want
not where
to
you come from.
exactly speaking to that. I want to say that oftentimes, and let me know what you think about this. I think the framework through which we view uh, inequality in this context is very limited, and it's not an accurate depictor of reality. For example, if you look with your natural eyes toward the horizon, you're going to see a certain degree. You're going to see an amplitude. It's going to go from one peripheral to the other. You'll see everything on that horizon. But if you put on sort of like those things they would put on horses, for example, and they would be these I forget the word for, but they're these shields on either side, so that the
Mm.
horse can only look straight ahead. Maybe
Yeah, yeah,
mules or whatever.
yeah.
The everything that fits within that scope is gonna be accurate because they are actually seeing it. The problem is the horse will believe
That's it.
that's all there is.
That's
So
it.
the horse can honestly judge, objectively, honestly, wholeheartedly, everything he sees in life. And that would be accurate. But the problem is his scope has been so limited that
Mhm.
there's so much that falls outside the parameter, it doesn't even become part of of consideration. And in this sense, I mean, we tend to equate women's equality with how well they fare in traditional manospheres. So
Yeah.
if you say a woman in the workplace not getting promoted, and then that is seen as sort of the scope of inequality, and
Hmm.
it's rated on the ability of a woman to excel in spaces that are occupied by men, and that
Yeah.
becomes the
Development.
narrative. That becomes the narrative as to whether or not there is equality in society. Are women
Mhm.
able to be CEOs? Are women able to be, up on that girder on the construction side? Are they out there getting shot in the street with us? This becomes sort of the measure of equality in some instances.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
what gets left outside of the scope is this: when you have women who transition and become more successful in traditionally masculine roles, what is there to be said about the power that is being vacated? For example,
mm,
women in other cultures and historically that have occupied power roles of raising, socializing, culturalizing the children, and being
filmmaker.
a homemaker.
Yeah.
And so what that means for the next generation, because when I hear you tell your story, you talk about your grandmother, you talk about your mother, and these are
Hmm.
power roles
Hmm.
because who you are, who I am, who our community is, it's a reverberation also of what our mothers instilled in us. So this
Yeah.
power role, we act as if that's not a very essential power role. It's like leaving it outside the other side of the blinders, because what winds up happening is when we look at the Black community, which is the most matriarchal community, when you look globally, we have the most female led households, ideologies within the scope of our community.
Hmm.
But when you look at other communities that are more masculine, male led, they seem to be doing better in reality. I mean, the results they get in terms of economics, wealth, education, property
Mhm.
ownership, any sort of social measure you want to use, it seems that we're doing worse, but we are the most female led. And to
Mhm.
me, it just smacks of
Well,
we tend to discuss equality within the limited narrow scope of those blinders of how well are you doing in men's spaces.
one of the and that's the thing is like some spaces like it's not even about the space that's what becomes the problem is it's like if there's a problem, right? The reason why men have created these so-called men spaces, it's all based on how we are naturally, right? Like
Mhm.
these spaces didn't belong to someone else before, and then we said, "Hey, I could
Here's
do that
a
job." Like,
here's
like,
a right,
like
exactly.
that's not how it worked. It was like, yo, you see a problem, and based on your nature, based on who you are, you become the solution. You create the solution, right? And
Right.
then, um, you know, world, life unravels in that way. But when you want to occupy other people's spaces, that's envy, that's jealousy, that's something completely different, you know. So when you talk about like, we have the most women-led homes. Um, Something that I think about is, there's a lot of men who turn out. Oh dang,
Uh-oh.
yeah. Anyways,
We're on a timeline. Yes.
yeah, I missed that one, but it's okay. I'm gonna have to tell them that uh give me 2 seconds. Give me
Okay.
2 seconds. Yeah,
So yeah, man, you were saying, yeah, this is a great conversation, man.
yeah, man.
Time
Yeah,
is not our friend at all. You know, time has something to say as well. So if
yeah,
you want to finish up on your last point, then I'll move to the next question.
yeah. No, I just wanted to say, like, you know, um, like my entire career is based on, I love acting. I love filmmaking. I love teaching acting. But um, it's all based on honoring my mother, right? And
Right.
I feel like that's what's become most important to me is honoring my ancestors, honoring my family, because everything that I am, um, they're the reason, you know.
Amen.
And I had a tough upbringing. It wasn't
Yeah.
it wasn't easy,
Yeah.
but at the same time, like that upbringing made me who I am. It's not for me to sit and try to disown folks or to blame them for whatever kind of issues
Mm.
that I have now, because we all got issues. They would make us who we are. Now I wouldn't even call them issues. They're just different questions we haven't answered yet. You
You
know.
know, man, I think this channel is called Black Fire Rising. I think we're a lot of us are Black Fire Rising in the sense that when I look at love, for example, we've been trained to think of love as by and large an emotional, sentimental sort of thing. At least
Hmm.
that's portrayed through a lot of the music. But when love is like fire, fire, it gets fueled by situations. It can burn, it burns hotter. And what it can do is it can be very destructive,
Hmm.
like a star, like fire. But when it has the benefit of logic, structure, rules, and focus,
Hmm.
it becomes the source of gardens, heats. It makes things grow. It provides warmth and it protects throughout the coldest seasons.
Yeah.
And I think if we're all little, we're all fires rising, going through the community. Uh, the fuel and the heat and the pressure that was in your life, I think the structure and the focus is what causes you to be more of a fireplace, as it were, versus just sort of something that's going to spread through the houses and burn down the community. And I think those of us that have become fireplaces, Uh, our intentions are to grow, but our intentions are to go around and show those other little free burners how to, hey, this is how you become better, because the fireplace not only is makes the community better, the fireplace itself feels better
Yeah,
within itself when it's within structure and not when it's just raging.
that's great you say that. My what I tell my lady is I'm a Sagittarius, I'm a fire sign. Sometimes I could be the sun, you know, sometimes I could be like a raging fire,
Right.
forest fire, but sometimes I could be the beach, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes I could be like you said, and I mean that in a sometimes I could be super passionate, let on fire, set the blaze kind of thing.
The great thing though is you have your limitations and you
Hmm.
have your structure, which no matter how, say one day you're the beach, one day you're raging even within a limit and a focus, because you're
Yeah,
never going to become destructive to your home, to your career, the things that rampant fires tend to do.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
You know,
sometimes that raging fire has to do more with defending and protecting. You
oh,
know, it's,
well said.
it's and you got to have that. You got to have that other side of you, because, like you said, like there's um how you are at home isn't the same as how you are at work, and how you are ordering fries isn't the same as how you are, what I mean, doing
Ordering a
something else.
filet mignon. So yeah, man, let me ask you. I have this interesting. I wanted to ask you. So we talk about being cloaked in blackness and being packages, being commodified. And then I imagine it's on every actor, it's on every individual to say, this is how much of myself I'm willing to play the role for the reward. And we talk about that. I understand that there's a certain amount of acquiescence that happens here. I'm playing a role, sort of stepping outside myself or digging in myself to be able to express this convincingly. But I don't want to lose myself. I do have values, I have limits.
Hmm.
When we talk about Dave Chappelle, we touched on Dave Chappelle, and I really admire that. First, it was the turning down of $50 million to purchase or not sell his dignity. And the community laughed. A lot of people laughed at him in mainstream. And now he turned around and stood on his ground. He spoke what made sense to him. And then he's tried to get punished and whipped for it, but he's standing his ground saying, I'll meet with you people, but on my terms. You're not
Hmm.
going to make me into a boy.
Hmm.
Nate Parker, a little while back, he did The Birth of a Nation. We know how much of a landmark, a negative landmark, Birth of a Nation was originally, when it
Hmm.
cast the Klansmen as the heroes, and
Hmm.
they had white men in blackface with fangs, and they demonized black people,
Hmm.
uh, codified and solidified this sort of cloak of blackness on us, this evil mantra of blackness.
and rallied
And
white hate, which is what they've been
right,
doing.
right. And we talk about life imitating art and the direction it sent Hollywood in. And we see that reflected in our realities now. Um, I wanted to ask you, what do you think about the Nate Parker incident and that situation, and as an example of what can happen to an independent film artist that is at odds with the existing industry? Because in Nate Parker's essence, he effectively got very punished for that. And
Hmm.
but when we fast forward and we look at Dave Chappelle, we see a relative success story in terms of standing his ground, saying I can't be bought. Do
Yeah,
you think that is do you think that is a hallmark of a new trend or possibilities in terms of us being able to label our own packages, as it were, in Hollywood, to commodify, to own the goods and services that we bring, and be more independent and actually be true to ourselves and our own story?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, but the thing is, you can't be, if what your mama taught you doesn't matter as much as practicing your if practicing your culture isn't more important than being multicultural, you can't be true to who you are, to who your people are, to representing your people.
Pause
Like
it for me. I'm kind of slow. If say that line one more time for me.
practicing your culture, where you come from, how you were raised, is less important than being
Oh,
multicultural,
ah,
then you can't really represent your
facts,
people well.
facts.
You can't.
Okay.
It's impossible. I mean, you sit and it's one thing for kids to see themselves, see you as a doctor and you're black and you're on TV. But just if you are playing an assimilated doctor, if you're playing a doctor that doesn't,
Mm,
you know, talk the way that he talks when he's at home, walk the way that he
right,
walks when he's at home, you know what I mean? Am I
right.
actually seeing my likeness? Like, am I actually, you know, or will I come out seeing, oh, I can be a doctor, but I gotta look like this. I'm
I have
still,
to act right like
yeah,
that person. Right.
exactly, exactly. I still gotta do
Wow,
it in this way.
that's
You know,
powerful.
it's yeah, it's just it's it's interesting when it comes to actually practicing your culture and it also speaks to structural racism. It speaks to institutional racism as well, and um, and the fact that I grew up with a certain type of privilege that my parents didn't. My older brothers didn't.
Mm.
I grew up not necessarily having to, and maybe maybe some people still feel this way. I grew up not having to give about the white way,
You can say
right?
it, man. I'm just gonna edit it out.
I'm
Trust
not
me.
even. I'm
Trust
not
me.
even. I'm not even gonna say it. I'm
I
just
got you.
saying.
Yeah,
You
I'm
know.
that's with you.
Now my pops is in the house too, so I'm like,
Oh, watch out, man. We,
yeah,
we
I
don't
don't
want to
cuss.
see him come up behind you under camera,
Hey, hey,
in
hey.
chokehold.
Nah, yeah, I don't want that. That was me reenacting what I don't want. But nah, yeah, it's just it's a respect thing. But I just I forget what I was I was getting to.
You're
But